In this chapter, the children discover that their grandmother was a pinball fiend, and I'm reading this fast, so hang on to your seats. Well, we were flabbergasted. I don't think we could, any of us, remember Grandma Evelyn ever taking us out to dinner. It simply wasn't done. We were pretty excited as we walked into town. There wasn't a lot of choice where to eat in those days. There was a burger shack on the beach and a Dairy Queen in the cafe. We chose cafe because we could all sit down, and Grandma Evelyn said she wanted to linger over dinner. That's when I figured she was trying to avoid Great Uncle Louie in his bath. Anyhow, we got there and sat in two booths right next to each other and started looking at the menu, and your daddy says, "Hey, look, they got a jukebox and a pinball machine. Mom, can I put a dime in the jukebox?" In those days, you got a song for a dime and three for a quarter. Grandma Evelyn, who was eyeing the pinball machine, astounded us by opening her purse and passing us a quarter. We had a thoroughly satisfying argument over which three songs to choose and who got to drop in the quarter and push the buttons. We sat back down, returned to our menus, and then Grandma Evelyn said, "Children, before I order, I'm going to take this dime and play the pinball machine just once." If you told us kids that we were adopted, we wouldn't have been more surprised. Grandma Evelyn was an extremely practical woman. We never had any fripperies in our house. "What's frippery?" asked Amanda. "Beats me," said Melissa. "Oh, you know, la-di-da, luxury." Not that Grandma Evelyn was cheap. She was as generous as she could be with the money that was around, which is practically none. And not that she didn't take any pleasure in stuff, but the kind of stuff we had pleasure in was library books and walking down to the ocean and trying to figure out what the heck the grown-ups were up to. Pleasures that were free. We would have been surprised if Grandma Evelyn had bought us a small toy at the drugstore, a new hair ribbon even, but to throw her dime away on pinball, and not even pinball for us, but pinball for herself. I guess when you got down to it, we'd never seen Grandma Evelyn do something just for herself. We hung over her shoulder and stared dumbstruck as she dropped in her dime, and the machine started whizzing. We'd never seen it played before, so we weren't sure what was going on with all the ding and banging and numbers coming up on the board. Grandma Evelyn flipped flippers and pulled levers and pounded the side of the machine. It was worth more than a dime to see that. "I never knew you played pinball," I said to Grandma Evelyn. "Now, don't you go telling your father about this," said Grandma Evelyn sternly when she finished the game. "Is that a good score?" asked John. "Not too bad, considering I haven't played in years," said Grandma Evelyn, looking thoughtfully at the board. Play again," said us kids. "Well," said Grandma Evelyn. She rooted through her purse until she found three more dimes, just a couple of times before we ordered dinner, maybe. "Can we play one game?" said John. "Nope," said Grandma Evelyn. She dropped the dime in. It was her own little world. I don't think she even knew we were there anymore. She played two more times. We were hungry and started edging back to the booth to order. Grandma Evelyn joined us, flushed and smiling. "I doubled it," she said triumphantly. We sat down and were about to ask for our cheeseburgers, onion rings, milkshakes when Grandma Evelyn said to the waitress, "Miss, could you give me some dimes for these?" She handed the waitress $2. "Sure thing," said the waitress. "You want to order now?" "Maybe a bit later," said Grandma Evelyn. She began by letting each of us kids play one game. Then she took back the machine and went at it hammer and tongs. People watched her from their booths as they ate their dinner. She gripped the machine with total concentration, never even noticing when Edward, who had gotten bored, went to do one of his job ratings. "What's that?" asked Amanda. Edward's hobby in those days was rating public bathrooms. He recorded everything in a notebook and called it his job ratings. We never knew what JOP stood for or meant. He knew all the gas station bathrooms, and on Saturdays would go into town, ask for the key, and update the ratings. He kept the notebook in his back pocket, and no matter where we went was forever delaying us by finding and inspecting the washroom. I don't know what he rated. The towels and toilets for cleanliness and stuff, I guess. It always seemed to take him an eternity. He'd come out making check marks or writing down numbers and announce a .511 or something, and we'd all go, "Oh, good, Edward, that relieves our minds considerably," or something equally sarcastic. As the family goes, we could be quite sarcastic, at least when Grandma Evelyn didn't put a lid on it. Anyhow, Edward goes off happy as a pig in a puddle because he has a new bathroom to rate. Grandma Evelyn keeps changing bills into dimes, and we're all getting hungrier and hungrier. When just how much longer she plans to keep this up before we can order. I begin to worry privately that she might be spending our dinner money. Bills are flying out of her purse like confetti. Just as I'm thinking that it's taken Edward much too long to rate the bathroom, the waitress comes and taps Grandma Evelyn on the shoulder and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, but do you have a son named Edward?" "Mm-hmm," says Grandma Evelyn, who can't be bothered with offspring right now. "Well, he seems to be trapped in the bathroom." "Come on, come on, come on," says Grandma Evelyn, pounding the machine and flipping flippers. "Ma'am, he can't get out," says the waitress. "No, he's just rating it. He'll come out when he's ready," says Grandma Evelyn. "Bingo, bingo." She's been yelling this excitedly every time the ball does what she wants. "No, he can't, apparently. He's been yelling through the door for the last half hour. Seems to lock the door, then stuck his hand up the towel machine. Now he can't get out." "Well, unlock the door," screamed Grandma Evelyn, who wasn't paying much attention with such a frenzy that she was screaming everything now. "We can't. We don't have a key," screamed the waitress back. "What do you mean you don't have a key? Well, how do you usually get people out when they've trapped themselves in the towel machine?" asked Grandma Evelyn, still dropping the dimes and pushing buttons. "The situation has never come up before," yelled the waitress right back. "Well, for heaven's sakes, pick the lock, take the door off the hinges. Must you bother me with every little detail?" screamed Grandma Evelyn. "He seems rather frightened," said the waitress. "Wouldn't you like to talk to him? No, I would not, said Grandma Evelyn. Can't you see I'm on a roll? In the end, they had the fire department in to take down the door because none of the women working in the cafe knew to take off a door hinge. Grandma Evelyn didn't even notice the firemen coming through in their uniforms and equipment and axes. Somewhere in the middle of this rescue operation, she ran out of dimes. She not only ran out of dimes, she ran out of all the money in her purse, so she sat down. It was at this moment that Edward arrived, rather shaken in the arms of the firemen. We had a volunteer fire department, and the town awarded a medal every year for the bravest acts. So the volunteers were always climbing all over each other, trying to outdo one another with unnecessary heroics. Put me down, yelled Edward. I'm fine. Might be smoke damage to the firemen. There wasn't even a fire, said Edward. The fireman couldn't refute this, so he finally did have to drop Edward, at which point Edward finally did suffer a casualty, landing with a thud on his tailbone, which became tremendously bruised and bothered him for years afterwards. How long did you plan to abandon me there, said Edward, who was simply furious at us all. Before we could answer, the waitress returned and said icily, would you care to order now? Murray's appeared around the bend. Melissa, Amanda, Pee-wee, and Aunt Sally sat down and ordered cheeseburgers and onion rings and milkshakes. When the waitress had set the food before them, they lifted their cheeseburgers and said, to Grandma Evelyn. To Grandma Evelyn, said Aunt Sally solemnly, and may there be pinball in heaven.